Why, hello there, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are discussing a ship that lives rent-free in many a community member's head. It is a ship that is probably still one of the most insane ships in the game, and one that I am surprised hasn't received any further nerfs beyond what it has already received, and that is the Tier 10 Soviet heavy cruiser, the Petropavlovsk. A ship that came out at a very interesting time. She was released back in, I think it was 9.10 or 9.9 or 9.7, somewhere around there. And when she was in testing, it was shortly before we got the changes to the CC program, where community contributors could no longer show off content that was in testing. Like you will see, about 3 days before a ship is set to release, most of the CC videos will be going up. Back in the day, the second they were added to their accounts for testing, they could stream them, they could make videos on them, whatever they wanted to do. Now, we're giving main these changes because, according to them, they wanted the discussion around the content to be focused on the content that was coming out in the current patch, rather than content that was coming, 2 or 3, 4 months down the road. And I think probably some of the shenanigans that happened with the Petropavlovsk was also a motivating factor, because the Petropavlovsk in testing was probably one of the most overpowered ships in game of all time. You see, the Petropavlovsk has, well, a pretty familiar set of features around it. Like most of the Soviet large ships, so Soviet heavy cruisers and battleships and battle cruisers, by that I mean like the Kronstadt and the Stalingrad, or large cruisers if you want to call them that, their main battery guns have just some physics about them. They are very high velocity. Petropavlovsk guns, for example, come out of the tubes screaming at 995 meters a second, which is just absurdly fast for the caliber of gun, right? And given the characteristics of the shell, it maintains that velocity and penetrating power far beyond any range it really should, right? It's really insane for a 220mm shell to be traveling that fast and maintain its inertia and all that jazz at range, but because of the Soviet shell ballistics, it do. And what that allows it to do is, at range, this is a cruiser with 220mm guns that can bully battleships at range. Most cruisers, even cruisers that have larger caliber guns than the Petropavlovsk in the game, at long range, yeah, they will bite into battleship armor, but you still have some shells that are bound, so they won't have enough penetrating power to get through and get to the really juicy bits and the interior bits of the armor. But with the Petropavlovsk, the shells really don't care, and they'll still zip right on through the armor of most battleships at range and citadel them, even still today, which I was very confused by, because I thought they changed some characteristics about the shells some time ago, but evidently not, as you'll see from the clips in the background. You can and will still bully battleships with the Petropavlovsk. So that's right, this is a cruiser that can citadel battleships at range. Now, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal if you could citadel battleships at close range. There's many a cruiser in the game that once you get up in battleships' faces, yes, you can citadel them. Makes sense if you're, a kilometer away, right? That the shells would maintain their velocity and their penetrating power at that close of a range, but now the Petra can do it at 15, 16 kilometers. Who cares? The laws of physics do not apply to thee. And what's really insane about the Petropavlovsk is that during testing, the gun accuracy was far better than what it is nowadays, and the dispersion was a hell of a lot better. So you would easily be removing, 15k from battleships at 16, 15 kilometers with the Petropavlovsk if they showed you broadside, which was downright insane. So thankfully they did nerf the accuracy of the guns by increasing the size of the dispersion ellipse, and that helps a little bit, right? But again, at longer ranges with just the few matches I played, getting used to her again, I was citadeling battleships at, again, 15, 16 kilometers like it was no problem. And yeah, while only one or two shells might have been citadeling them every salvo, first off, it's a cruiser, right? It has cruiser reload time, doesn't have a battleship reload time where it takes half a minute to reload. Depending upon what build you want to go with, you can get down to like a 13, 14-ish second reload time. Then, of course, you add Adrenaline Rush on top of that. So you're cranking out these shells at a pretty respectable rate, right? So, yeah, and even the shells that aren't citadeling, they are still pinning and doing additional damage. So that's a little nuts. And that is, of course, the main feature of the Petropavlovsk. Those sweet, sweet guns. And if you take the unique upgrade, you can even increase their damage by 10% and decrease the dispersion by another 10% as well, which is kind of scary. But anyway, on top of that too, this ship was stupidly survivable for a very long time, because the ship you see right now is sitting out of the water much higher than it used to. You see, back in the day, this ship was darn near a submarine. The deck was almost at, and I am not joking, go look up some older screenshots of Petropavlovsk or some old gameplay footage. The deck was almost at the height of the water. That's how low this ship sat in the water. Thankfully, they did raise it. But before then, her being so low in the water meant that, well, you couldn't really citadel the thing, because the citadel was already fairly low, and then you have the whole, almost all the ships under the surface of the water. So while this cruiser could citadel you at 15 kilometers plus, when you would try to return fire to it as a battleship, it probably wasn't going to happen, because, again, the ship sat so low in the water that most battleship shells, they'll lose their velocity by the time they try to get to the hull after getting through all that water, especially when you're talking about shooting at the ship from 15 kilometers plus, unless you're another Soviet ship or another ship with, physics-breaking shells, like maybe like the French battleships where they could carry their inertia through the water. It just wasn't going to happen. And then bow in, too, it has an icebreaker bow, so you couldn't really overmatch the bow armor from a bow in profile. And if you haven't noticed, the ship is exceptionally skinny. So there's not a lot of bow to hit there in the first place, and if you do hit the bow, you're probably going to hit the icebreaker bow, which means your shells are going to just bounce off of it. So it's a cruiser that could citadel battleships, could bow tank them in return, and also probably couldn't be citadeled by them unless they caught you broadside in the middle of a turn, which means this ship was incredibly broken. Oh, and by the way, too, it was pretty fire resistant as well, because, again, it's a small target, and its deck armor was 50 millimeters thick, which used to be, there's not really a whole lot of guns that can get through 50 millimeters of armor regularly, especially when we're talking about cruiser caliber guns, but thankfully that was nerfed too, down to 40 millimeters. So it has been nerfed quite a bit, especially when it comes to its survivability, but it is still ridiculously tanky today because its belt armor is still thick, it's still skinny, it's still a small target from range, and it still does get the cruiser burn time, right? So when you do set it on fire, it's only on fire for a mere 20-ish seconds, again, depending upon what exactly you have in your module build. So, yeah, if you need something to go to an island and not die and just be a major thorn in the enemy team's side, it's definitely Petropavlovsk. And like I said, the guns, the parameters of the shells have not been touched. So you can still absolutely bully battleships at range. If you're on like the edge of an island, you push up at your front two guns on the target and just get them pumping out into the battleship's broadside. It's going to give them a miserable time. Oh, on top of that too, it has hydro. It has a Soviet radar, which is long range but short duration. So it has a high degree of utility as well. So this ship is still pretty insane today, in my mind at least, especially since, again, those guns are intact. The only really other big nerf that's happened to the Petropavlovsk is that they keep cranking up her detection range for some reason. Like, sure, it's detectable from 15.8 kilometers base now, but like, what are you going to do? Shoot it? you're probably just going to bounce off of the side armor if they're angled, because most Petropavlovsk players have played the other Soviet large ships, and the other Soviet large ships have the same weakness. They are incredibly sturdy when bow in or angled, but, I mean, God help them if you get to their broadside, because you are going to get deleted by their main battery guns at that point. Like the background footage you're watching now, I've probably got clipped by that Vermonter. That's about to happen here. And yeah, most of the health goes away, but then you can slap Kuznetsov on here. You get that free additional damage con and heal with Kuznetsov. So yeah, there's a reason why this ship is usually restricted or banned from COTS and clan battles, because it is still so freaking good. And like, man, does it need to get nerfed again? Probably a little bit. I would think a fair nerf would be chill out with some of the absolutely insane, physics-defying shells properties after you get past 14, 15 kilometers, and maybe crank up the accuracy a little bit. Like, I mean, I get that it's neat that it can citadel battleships from range. That's probably what a lot of players do play it for. But, I mean, really? A cruiser? Really? A heavy cruiser with 220s? No, I get it. If we're talking about something like the Siegfried, or even some of the 305mm cruisers, like, sure, fine at that point, but a 220 shell? I mean, like, with these velocities, too, in real life, you would get maybe a dozen shots out of the barrels before you're just disintegrating the barrels and obliterating the rifling when you are having shells that are going 90 to 95 meters a second coming out of them that are, 220mm shells. That's a little goofy in my mind, but I mean, I guess wargaming. And again, if you get the unique upgrade, my God, you're just bullying people in random battles at that point. But yeah. Oh, and the turret's 360, if you haven't noticed that too, because, why not? But guys, that's my 2 cents on the Petropavlovsk. It's still well worth the grind in my mind. I don't think they're going to really nerf it anymore. They haven't touched it at all since... oh, I'm sorry. They did actually nerf it again here recently. Oh, look at that. They nerfed the range again to 16.3 kilometers because I guess that's the only thing that they want to touch on this ship. I guess they assume since everyone can see it, everyone can dogpilot, and you can kill it, which is really the only way to kill it. You have to dogpilot all at the same time. And a one-on-one fight, unless it's like against a Des Moines or something, or a Worcester, or something that's really, really just dishing out the HE spam and the HE alpha, it's probably going to take an eternity to murder. So I guess that's the thought process they're going with, and evidently that's the only thing they're comfortable with nerfing about the Petro. Well, yeah, go figure. So guys, it's my 2 cents on the Petropavlovsk after not really having played her for about 7 or 8 months now at this point. So let me know what you guys think about the Petra in the comments down below. Does she need to be nerfed more? Is she fine as is? Do you guys think she should be buffed if you want to get super controversial? But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday and wonderful rest of your weekend. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.